The next thing we're going to talk about is, and I apologize in advance, fucking J.K. Rowling. So here is J.K. Rowling with a tweet, a banger in the GC space. This has 750,000 likes on Twitter. That is probably 100,000 real people who clicked that, and only 600,000 bots. But that's by her tweet standards, that's a lot of attention. 19,000 comments is a lot of replies, probably largely from bots and me, who isn't a bot. J.K. Rowling has posted this picture of Donald Trump signing a thing surrounded by white girls. And she says, "Congratulations to every single person on the left who's been campaigning to destroy women's and girls' rights. Without you, there'd be no images like this." And this is just unbelievable how, brazen this is. J.K. Rowling has been lying about trans people and spreading transphobic misinformation that the far right, like Donald Trump, has just been using word for word in their campaigns to generate people moving towards the far right. J.K. Rowling's promoted a load of people like Matt Walsh and all these crazy gender critical men. Graham Linehan is an example of someone who used to claim to be on the left, and we've just watched him completely slide right on every single issue, from Palestine to women's rights to abortion to Gamergate, everything. It's very clearly a radicalizing force. As someone mentioned earlier, transphobia is a gateway drug to the far right. It absolutely is. Her lying about all these people is now why so many people are voting far right. People aren't wow, I am liberal on every single issue, but I'm worried that if I don't vote for Donald Trump, there won't be... my daughter might have to run with a trans girl at playground at school or whatever. That just isn't the case. They have to get into this ridiculous gender critical cult that J.K. Rowling is not just a part of, not just one of the leaders of, but fully immersed inside, and believe all this ridiculous transphobic propaganda, and then believe they're coming for your children, and then start buying into all this propaganda about abortion and sex exists from conception, and spiral out into this whole big thing about big pharma, and then you feel like you have to vote for Donald Trump. Claiming that Donald Trump here, surrounded by a bunch of white girls, banning trans girls from girls' sports, is the fault of people who have been arguing for trans rights, is just crazy. This guy is especially trying to describe it as campaigning to destroy women's and girls' rights. He's literally destroying women's and girls' rights. Donald Trump, in the same, as we looked at last week, in the same fucking bill, is removing the protections from women who are sexually assaulted or sexually harassed at universities. In the same fucking thing, is removing protections for trans people. Literally part of the same ruling. Donald Trump himself is a rapist and a sexual assaulter. He constantly boasts about being misogynistic, about exploiting women's boundaries, about crossing... He was talking about going into a changing room full of young women and stuff. He is everything that when you say destroying women's rights and girls' rights, he is the example of it. And somehow J.K. Rowling is trying to blame him and people voting for him on the existence of trans people trying to fight for their rights. It's just so brazen. It's just so ridiculous. She is a right-wing billionaire who has exclusively been campaigning about trans rights. Nothing else. She hasn't been saying anything about the abortion ban. She hasn't been saying anything about Trump being a rapist or telling everyone that they have to vote for Kamala Harris no matter what. She hasn't been doing any of that. She has just been spinning this transphobic propaganda, stuff that is just completely, trivially, factually false, that she does not give a fuck about. She doesn't care about fact-checking anything. She just makes stuff up. She was one of the people who most popularized the idea that Emaine Khalif and the other lady from Taiwan, I can't remember her name, I'm very sorry, that they were men in disguise in the Olympics when they were just intersex cis women, or maybe even not intersex. We don't even know all of the details because it's their own private medical information that they aren't required to share with anyone. She's the one doing this. This was very clearly a far-right, propaganda, scaremongering thing to onboard people who are gullible. That was clearly the whole point in it. It was started by some right-wing Russian boxing organization, which got disaccredited from the Olympics. And she was the one. She must have been the most famous person talking about this. She got it into the eye of Donald Trump and Elon Musk, who then promoted it to their people. And because she has all these connections with these low-level gender criticals and stuff, she is the biggest amplifier for this stuff. She is the biggest amplifier for some little nothing made up story about a trans person, blasting it internationally to the far right. So I think very few people did more to contribute to Trump's election than J.K. Rowling. I mean, sure, Elon Musk investing billions of dollars, the failure of the Democrats, the war in Ukraine, the war in Israel, all of these are obviously bigger factors than just one J.K. Rowling. But as far as individual people's efforts, she is one of the biggest megaphones for far-right propaganda, because she is somehow, unbelievably, still has some kind of upper middle class British reputation. Oh, well, no, she just has concerns. Yeah, she's just sharing all this crazy stuff. Look at this next thing. Here is her sharing some kind of meme that your racist uncle might have shared on Facebook in 2016. Just one of these ridiculous, crappy AI-generated things. So this, you can tell this is AI because these women, there's 6 women on the page and there is 13 legs. There is just leg here. And hilariously, the creators of this obviously AI-generated thing have put their little watermark, but over the couldn't you just go on Photoshop and just quickly erase this floating 13th leg? No. Okay. And then there's an argument between 2 groups of women. There's 3 angry looking white women here, and then there's someone who's obviously meant to be a trans woman, and then a black woman and another white woman. Of course, this side's more diverse. That's kind of realistic with the gender critical movement. But anyway, one of them saying, how come a third change room for she's meant to be a fucking writer and she's sharing this. How come a third change room for transgender people isn't seen as kind and inclusive enough? And they say, well, it is kind, but the inclusive part means there need to be actual women present against their will if need be in order for me to be happy. So just straight up, this is a meme, that the shittest meme you've ever seen, with an extra leg and change room as a single word. Just saying trans people need to force women to do things against their will. You know what it's like using a changing room as a trans person? Exactly the same as using a changing room or a change room as a cis person, apart from there's this little thing in the back of your mind saying there's a 1 in 10,000 chance that someone might come in and just beat the shit out of you for absolutely no reason. There's this kind of idea that trans people need to cause cis people to suffer, or they're knowingly doing it against people's will, or they get off on it or something like this. It's just unambiguously transphobic. She doesn't just have concerns. What are you talking about? And this is her meme in defense of this person who admitted to harassing their colleague, a nurse who got discharged for harassing her colleague who's trans, who was just trying to go about her job. None of this fucking needs to be actual women. None of this bullshit. What are you talking about? When I use a changing room, I just want to get changed. I don't want to. I'm the kind of person who doesn't even want to have a conversation with people, with strangers, or even really with anyone. I just want to go in, do the thing, get out. Ideally, in the most in my little world way that I possibly can. I think most people are like that. There's no different. I don't want there to be. Whenever I go into a changing room, I always hope that there's no one else in there. With this kind of oh, there needs to be actual. No, the reason why a third change room for transgender people isn't kind and inclusive is because it's neither of those things. It's segregation. Oh, why can't you be happy with a separate but equal room down the end of the corridor with its own sign that just puts all trans people into one? Well, firstly, because yeah, that's segregation, and segregation is bad. We've seen that the numerous times when we've ever tried to do segregation on minority populations, any country in the world. It leads to more harassment, more abuse. Secondly, who the fuck is going to spend a load of money on building a changing room just for trans people? No one. No gym is going to do that. No, like, the NHS doesn't have enough money for anything. The NHS is, like, struggling because the Conservatives and the new Labour government are just trying to destroy it. And you think they're going to spend money on making a third changing room for the one trans doctor in the whole fucking hospital who actually has been using that changing room for years and it doesn't affect you that she's using it at all? No, they aren't going to do that. And was kind about excluding people. Trans women have been using women's toilets and changing rooms for longer than J.K. Rowling has been alive, without issue. Much longer than she's been obsessed with trans people. And it's just a completely made up issue. There's absolutely no rationale behind this at all. But she wrote a book. Like, she thinks change room is a word. Oh, suddenly she's got this, like, British middle class centrist respect behind her still. And it's just crazy that still exists. Just absolute ridiculous that she hasn't lost a reputation like Elon Musk. She is as insane as Elon Musk. That the only thing in her benefit is she doesn't do lots of public speaking engagements like he does, because she would not come across sane if she was actually in any kind of media setting where she was being asked a question and wasn't just allowed to give a pre-prepared statement. Yeah, horrible, extreme person. And if anyone is to blame for Donald Trump's rise to success and being surrounded by a bunch of white girls as he takes away their rights, it's her.